Welcome back, everybody, to Two Guys and a Stack of Comics. My name is Reed. Along with me, as always, is Mike. I hope if anybody is a college basketball fan that you are enjoying March Madness, as
Oh
I
yeah.
am. Although today I am wearing Indiana stuff. I am a hardcore Purdue fan, but weirdly, I love Indiana as well, even though they hate each other and they're massive rivals. My dad attended both schools, and so I grew up rooting for both. And so it's very awkward to support those two. But hope it's March. Hope folks who do watch college basketball are enjoying March Madness. Mike and I this week, we are going to kind of start doing something new. On Friday nights, we're going to just go through our comic book stacks. We've been doing What's in the Stack on Monday. We're going to kind of move that to Friday and just kind of go through what is in our stack, what we liked for the week, what we thought the best book of the week was, and then kind of go through some overall recommendations. Some might be good, some might be bad, but just kind of walk through what we picked up for the week each week. For us, as always, it's interesting to see what did you guys buy as well, if there's something that we missed. And so first week seemed appropriate to kick it off with what was the best comic this week. And it's not a shocker to anybody who watches our channel. Best book of the week, Conan number 19, Jim Zub and Doug Brathwaite on this comic book. Great cover by Della Torre. They did some cool alternate covers, although I will say I feel bad for any of the alternative covers because if Della Torre is doing the main cover, I don't really know who's looking for the alternate cover. Mike,
That is so awesome. Isn't that cover cool?
no, Della Torre is just such a great artist, and we got to see a longer thing from him on Savage Sword. But we get this issue. Book of the week, Doug Brathwaite's done such a great job on this comic. He's been kind of the B artist behind Della Torre, but it's almost insulting to call him the B artist because honestly, his work is A grade. It's crazy how Conan has two artists who just seem to be maybe the two best going artists right now. But Conan 19, Book of the Week for me, Mike. I know for you as well. What did you like about the issue this week?
Oh God, the storytelling, the artwork. Somebody asked us in the comments about do we think that this book is truly outstanding, or is it just because the bar is so low for comics right now? And I will say, I think this book is outstanding.
Mhm.
I love the storytelling. Jim Zub takes you on a great adventure every time, and the artwork is so good. And I do want to call out, I do want to shout out to the colorist.
Mhm.
Here's a panel because the colors were really good. I think these two pages kind of really illustrate. It's the story is so good. You and spoilers, right? I don't know if you want to go into
Yeah, no,
spoilers,
we'll
but
go through all the books. We'll go through kind of the spoilers on it, but
the spoilers are so he's devastated. Believe has perished, and he kind of has to bury her. He doesn't know where he is. The intrigue, the adventure of him slogging through the swamps and the jungle, and not in friendly territory at all. Meanwhile, like he doesn't know if some animal is tracking him or something. And, then he falls into a swamp, has to fight a crocodile, as Conan does, the
no,
trials
I
and
mean,
tribulations
in
of
the way he
Conan.
fights a crocodile, he has a swarm of bees attack him. He fights a panther, who
Yeah,
turns out to be, a character that's very familiar to Conan fans at the end. Um,
right. Wasn't that cool?
what was so great about the comic book to me is the simplicity of it, but still how good it is. And what's so weird, largely, this is a man whose love interest just died. The love of his life just died. He is grieving. He is burying her. He is stranded in the wilderness, and he
Yeah.
has to survive. And the great thing about it is that's a really simplistic plot, but it had more action and depth to it than like the buildup of most events in the big two. What I was
Oh,
stunned by
yeah.
with this, and it called back to me, Ultimate Black Panther was a comic book that I liked, and I still am picking it up. But 11 issues were leading to this conflict between Black Panther and Moon Knight. And the
Oh, yeah.
12th
Right.
issue was going to be the payoff. And there was maybe 2 pages of action. In this Conan book, there is like a 7-page fight between him and this panther that is just go and it's
Yeah,
beautifully drawn. It's illustrated. It has depth. They show the strength of the character. Like it felt cinematic in its presentation, and that is what's missing out of comic books. Is everything's been so decompressed in the
right.
big two, where it almost feels like they almost feel like they're making it on a budget with like, oh, we can't do too big of an action scene because that won't fit or something, which is insane. But too often you get these buildups that just don't match. And this again, this is a really simplistic story. This is a man who's going through immense emotional trauma, physical trauma, all that, and he's just fighting in the wilderness to survive. And yet it kind of felt as grand and epic as any buildup that we've seen. And again, it's just the stakes and the storytelling, and like you said, the attention to detail, the plotting that takes place in the comic book. I love that they interlaced as he's fighting the panther and the alligator, these flashbacks of Belit and how much she meant to him, and how he's like, no, I
Right.
can't die. I can't let her spirit die. Just such great stuff. And I think the cool thing about Conan is a very stoic warrior kind of character. And I loved that
Right.
the book had him processing an emotional sort of trauma thing, but it didn't turn him into this weepy man child. He handled it exactly as Conan would. He's a little
Exactly.
somber, but he
Yeah.
just wants to go kill something as a result. And
Yeah.
that's the brilliance
You
and
you know
simplicity of the character, but they still write him with depth. Yeah, it was really, really, really impressive issue
the beauty of
overall.
it is they pack that all into 36 pages, 36 pages, 32 pages, whatever.
Yeah,
You had this whole arc, and it leaves you at the end with the intrigue, and you always want more at the end of these Conan books by Titan, because this team is just firing on all cylinders. You have the arc of the it starts off with the funeral of Belit, and he's alone, and then the slog through the jungle, and defeating the alligator. Like, it had action, but even little moments like when he met up at the village with the villagers and they
brush him
turned him
aside. Yeah.
away. It's a character building moment, because Conan's like, yeah, I can kill them all and just take what I want, but what's the point? And then he moves through, which gives his character the depth. Like, he's not just a marauding murderer. I mean,
Mhm.
Conan has a soul and he's grieving, but he's in a very savage world and a very savage time, and these things are going to happen to a guy like that in the middle of nowhere with no friends, and he like kills a lizard and eats it at one point.
Yeah.
but,
No,
but
it's just a great survival story of this
but
character, and it it's great storytelling, and that you're invested in Conan. And I think what I love about great writers like Zub with Conan, and I've seen several folks do this with like James Bond. I think if you ever read the Lee Child books, Jack Reacher, they're very similar sort of characters in my opinion. Where on a surface level examination of the character, if you don't know the character, you just go, oh, he's a mindless barbarian or a
yeah,
suave secret agent or this wandering drifter who kills people kind of thing. But there's such character laced into those. These guys have their own personal honor codes, the way they operate, their goals, their motivations, that if you're not a fan, you kind of can just skip over it and not see it. And it's always sad when I see that, because there's people who I think skip by these things and just, I want to see him. It's like, how many times am I see Conan kill something with a sword? You miss the depth of the actual character
what
and the
what did
story
you
that they're telling. And that's where Titan's done such a good job is I love that the series pivots to these different points in Conan's life. That we had a really cool 2 issue with Billy, and then we just move right into where she's dead. We didn't need the grand arc of her dying because that's covered in Howard's material and stuff like that. It's just really cool how much they just transport you to different places, even within the character's life. And yet he always feels so consistent, which is really cool. We can
what
kind
did,
of
what
do
did you
the.
think
Go
of
ahead,
that
Mike.
little what did you think of that little scene of him with the villagers? Like,
No,
he
it
needed
fit
help.
perfectly with who he is, and that's the appeal. If Conan does kill those villagers, right, then it's kind of he's just this mindless brute who kills whatever he wants.
Yeah,
I always love the personal honor code that he has, and
yeah,
that
exactly.
that is what makes the character. And I think it's so cool to see that happen. I think the other cool part that we got in the book, we get the introduction at the end, the last page, the sort of panther figure that's stalking him is Zula, who is from the Roy Thomas comic book run at Marvel. again, cool thing if you're a longtime Conan fan, you see them honoring Roy Thomas's legacy with the comic books. I know he appeared quite a bit in the comics. I know there was, I
Mhm.
picked up a few Titans omnibus reprints, and I had a couple of the Marvel ones. There's where I think there's an adventure with him and Red Sonja and Zula and things like
Yeah,
that. So
there
there's
is.
a great letter in the back from Jeff Shanks who writes the letters. Again, always appreciated too in Conan. And that if you didn't know who the heck the character was at the end, literally they'll give you a page at the end that explains who the character is. And there's a really cool thing in this too, which I believe they put like a QR code in there in the back as well, to where if you play this Conan RPG game, you can actually download that character. Again, cool integration of those two things. I'm not going to do that. I'm not a video game guy, but I do think it's really smart to see Titan do that for these characters. Again, it's the best book of the week, continues to be the best book. And like you said, that question we kind of get of, are we overrating this because the bar is lowered, compared
Yeah.
to it? No, I do think in any age, this book would be at the top of our stacks. It would be the book that we were looking forward to the most.
You
It's
know,
routinely great.
this is one of those books like 20 years from now when it's an omnibus collection
Mhm.
that Conan fans will all have the hardback cover on their bookshelf next to Howard's and everybody else's, because it's that good.
No, it really, really is. It definitely best comic of the week. Let us know if you guys picked that one up. We'll kind of go through the rest of our recommendations for the week, or some that we wouldn't. But before we get to those, you and I both picked up a couple comic books this week that,
Yeah.
while not bad, I think again illustrate the problems with the big two.
Oh
In that
yeah.
there are two books that released. One is a DC book that ties into a character. Very different comic books, by the way. The other is
Right.
a Marvel one. And so the one I'm going to reference is Deadpool and Wolverine #3. Mike, I believe you have the Justice League and Sonic the Hedgehog crossover. Now, these
Yes.
two books do not seem like they would be related. And what I will say is, I picked up the Sonic and Justice League one. It's a fun comic. My toddler is tearing through it now, so I probably never going to see
Literally
that.
tearing through it.
Probably never going to see that book again. But the interesting thing about both of these books, I think both were good. Both were decent introductory issues. This Deadpool and Wolverine's #3. The Sonic one is #1. The sad part, there was a Sonic movie that released in December. Wouldn't it have been great for DC Comics to have that book on the stands when the movie came out? And again, you're
Yes.
talking a gap of 3 months. It's they can never time these things up. Same thing with Deadpool and Wolverine. Wouldn't it have been amazing if the first trade of this was out, or if the #1 issue was out when you put, I don't know, a $1.3 billion movie in the theaters last year? And this is the weirdest thing that comic books do, in that, right idea. Absolutely. Right idea. Same thing for Justice League and Sonic.
Oh,
Right idea.
if I could
Horrible
just say
execution.
if I could just say something about this movie, I had no idea it was coming out. I only am peripherally aware of Sonic,
Hmm.
but my son and his friends love this character.
Oh, yeah.
And they all went to the movie. I think they saw it twice. They
Yeah.
saw it twice. And, Jackson has a father that takes him to the comic store every week. So when he saw this, he was like, oh, wow. But my whole son's friend group, if this had been at the movie theater, they all
Yeah.
would have bought copies because their parents don't take them to the comic shop. You know, I'll take them to the comic shop on free comic book day. I'll pick up all the kids and take them. And that's probably the only time those kids get to go to the comic shop. So if DC and Marvel, if you want to sell 1 million copies of a book, I know 30,000 is what you're shooting for a month. But if you want to sell 1 million comics, literally 1 million comics,
Even if you don't want to
you
do the
bundle
paper,
these up and send them out with the cardboard foldouts that the movie theater sends out to every theater
well,
in the
even if you
country.
didn't want to do the whole book, print out one of those one sheet posters that go to the movie theaters all the time and put the QR code for a free download of the comic with the release date of the issue #2. right? There's so many ways they could get. And again, I think both of these were good comic books. It's just hilarious to me that we continually and routinely see this
I mean,
from DC and Marvel. That
this movie was the hit of the season for the kids.
oh yeah,
Did
for
you
winter, yeah, that was the big movie at
did
Christmas, and
you take your kids to see it?
no, it's one of the only movies it's the only movie my toddler has seen in theaters because he was so excited from the trailer. And my 16-year-old, because it's Sonic the Hedgehog, that was one where it's like, oh,
Yeah,
I could go too. If you want. It's like
they
it's
love it.
well,
And
no, that's the brilliance of a Sonic. That's the brilliance of a Mario. Is it's multi-generational. Heck, I played Sonic when it was out in 1991 on the Genesis. So like,
yeah,
if my kids hadn't gone, I probably would have went and seen the movie. And
yeah,
that's when you
it
have a
was
character
cool.
like that, and you make a smart decision like DC and IDW did to make this comic book.
But the
If
timing,
only you could have just tied it together. And again, both are fun adventure comic books. I think crossing over Sonic with Justice League is certainly not something I thought was ever going to happen.
oh,
It's still a really cool idea.
Jackson was
Um,
like, I gotta have that comic. I'm
yeah,
like, okay,
just
let's
disappointing from both companies that they failed to capitalize. And again, I think both books were good. I would say if you liked Deadpool and Wolverine the movie, you'll love that comic book. There's some
oh
cool
yeah.
comic book ties to it, but just very, very interesting.
Yeah.
All right, so yeah, missed great comic book and then missed opportunity. We'll kind of go through, Mike. What was the rest of your stack for this week, sir? What would you recommend to
Yeah,
folks?
let's see. You've already seen Sonic, you already seen Conan. Of course,
Absolute Flash. Yeah, we did a long form video on that
Absolute
one.
Flash. That one was awesome. Of course, I had to buy like three different covers. Thank you, DC. I'm keeping you in business with your alternate covers. Um, A Crisis on Infinite Earths 12. Again with the reprints. So that's three new ones I bought, one reprint. This was in my box this week, but it came out last week.
The comic strip print number 31. Yeah.
Detective Comics number 31 with that iconic Batman cover. So cool. So two reprints and three new comics. Then this one was in my box. It's the Friendly Neighborhood Spider-Man. Jackson
Prequel to
loves
the
the
TV
TV
series.
show.
Okay.
He's reading that. And then, of course, this came out. Jackson had to have it because somehow, I don't know how, but we missed Ultimate Spider-Man number 11. He's like, Dad, can we just get this? Is
Catching up through the trades. Yeah.
Yeah.
No.
And so the trade for number 2 of Ultimate Spider-Man's out. So I bought that. I spent, a small fortune to get that one comic. But
No, again for the trade waiters out there, yeah. I mean, I definitely think Ultimate Spider-Man has gotten a lot better. So I would definitely for trades, I would recommend that. Pretty good week of comic books. DC, I thought had a strong week. We did a video on Absolute Flash. I would say I think that's an interesting issue. I think folks could check out.
loved it.
Absolute Batman number 6 came out this week. Continues on with the story that was started at the beginning. We have Batman kind of dealing with Black Mask. This was a little more of a brutal issue, and kind of had where the party animal characters get loose quite a bit, and they're like going, and they've got bounties on people, and basically within the book, Bruce Wayne's identity gets exposed to all of his friend groups. So the majority of his villains now
Oh,
know that Bruce Wayne is Batman. It really is setting up to be a different and interesting take. I think again, this comic is not going to be for everybody. I do enjoy it quite a bit though. I think it's really engaging, it's different. And for the Absolute Universe, that's all I was really looking for is can you give me where Batman feels about 75% still Batman and then justify its existence with some different things. And I think it's done its job. I would recommend if you're still picking up Absolute Batman, I think there's still some great things to be seen there. Reason I'm good with Absolute Batman though is I still have other Batman comic books coming out. And so this Batman and Robin Year One, Mark Waid and Chris Samney. It's the original kind of first year of Robin, Dick Grayson teaming up with him. It's just a great classic Batman story. It shows the great dynamics of Bruce Wayne and Dick Grayson. It's probably a story that's been told a million times over of that first year of Dick Grayson being Batman. But Mark Waid just does such a great job of writing Bruce Wayne as a character where he is completely Batman, but he doesn't just buy into him being like a jerk and a bad father. It's a really great comic. If people have missed that, hunt down these issues or go with the trade. I think if you want some classic great Batman storytelling, you have that. Mark Waid going with the double on that though, because he also has Batman, Superman, World's Finest 37. This again, classic set. Dick Grayson's Robin. Superman feels like Superman. Great use of Aquaman in this issue. They're letting Mark Waid tell these stories in the past of DC Comics, and it's just brilliant because if you're tired of modern continuity and the changes that have happened, and you just want to read Batman and Superman or Batman, they're supplying that. So he's doing great there.
I think
Mark
they're
Waid
watching our.
also.
I think they're watching our channel, Reed.
Oh, and then Mark Waid also has a Superman Black Label book, Last Days of Lex Luthor. This is sort of a sequel to the Superman Birthright story that he did a long time ago. This issue was delayed, I believe, over a year because they had Brian Hitch on the art, but Brian Hitch is contracted with Ghost Machine with Image, and so it took a long time. Worth the wait. Great issue. The first issue, if you missed it, I think they reprinted it. Came out a year ago. This was the second issue. Really cool story between Superman and Lex Luthor, and it just shows how well Mark Waid gets the character of Superman. I would
I'm
absolutely
a
recommend that to folks
huge
as
Mark
well.
Waid fan. Huge
No,
Mark Waid.
he's yeah, he's a little outspoken on a lot of things, and I don't whether I agree with him or disagree with him. I do wish sometimes he was a little less contentious, but you cannot question the man's ability to write a comic book, yarn. He has done so well writing so many characters. He does a great Batman and a great Superman at the same time, and then you get a combo book of the two. It's everything you could want as a DC
And
Comics
he
fan that you
wrote
have a great writer doing it.
he wrote a great Wally West Flash back in the day.
Yeah. No, he's an absolute classic comic book
Yeah.
writer. And I'll even say I'll eat a little bit of humble pie at least for a few issues here. I was absolutely unhappy with Tom Taylor being made the writer on Detective Comics. I've never read a Tom Taylor comic book I've liked. He's produced 5 or 6 good issues of Detective Comics so far, though. This is Detective
Oh,
Comics 1095. Pretty interesting story. There is, at times, I will say, some heavy-handed things about the American criminal justice system. Even if I agree with them, I do wonder why you have to make it that blatant in the comic book. But I do think that this was a really solid thing, and he does seem to have a pretty good voice for Bruce Wayne. Michael Janin doing art on that. But again, that's why I love Absolute Batman, is DC is giving me all of these alternatives if I
yeah.
want a more classic Bruce Wayne, and they're doing really well there. Last two, slower week for Marvel, and I'll pick up 2 books that I will tentatively say I thought were interesting. Eddie Brock, Carnage, #2. So Eddie Brock, classically Venom. They have destroyed Venom. Venom is a disaster. I don't know what they've done with that comic book. They did such a cool run with Donny Cates about 4 or 5 years ago, and since then they have just run that book into the ground. What was kind of cool is they sort of ejected Eddie Brock out of the Venom world, and he took on the Carnage symbiote, and so it kind of takes on like a Dexter sort of
Oh,
vibe where he is using the Carnage symbiote as I will let Carnage kill because Carnage is going to kill no matter what. We will hunt down serial killers and the worst people in the Marvel universe. It's interesting. It is a little dark, but I do think it's an interesting concept. I don't know
just
how
a
it will
little bit.
last,
Just a
but
little dark.
overall, if you're going to use Carnage and you can't have Eddie Brock as Venom, I think it's
Yeah.
kind of an interesting
There you
sort of
go.
thing. And last book I'll mention, I don't really do events, but I do read Fantastic Four all the time. And so this year's event is this One World Under Doom book. Doom has taken over the entire Marvel universe. I will say this. There are some overly political tones in it that will push folks out. I do think if you actually read the book for yourself, though, it is a really interesting examination of Victor Von Doom. And I think while I don't love every element of it, what I do have to give this credit, they have really set Doom up in this book where he has kind of checkmated everybody really, really well. And I love when they let a villain do that in a way where you can just tell he's playing at a different level than everybody else, especially when it's Doom. And so, where I will at least say that I like that book, Doctor Doom is the one villain that I think the less you get of him, the better. Because he is such a great villain that when he comes on the board, it should be the end game kind of feel. There should
Yeah.
never just be an issue where Doctor Doom is just there.
Yeah.
He should be the big piece on the board. And I will say, well, I don't love everything about that. I do think it's really cool that they are setting it up as like, no, man, this guy is a different level from everybody
Mhm.
else. And there's some really cool developments where at the end of the book, to basically publicly shame the Fantastic Four, he cures Ben Grimm and removes his curse of being the Thing. Because the Fantastic Four go, it's got to be a ruse. He's not actually being benevolent because he's doing a lot of things people are liking since he took over the world. So the Fantastic Four go to publicly embarrass him, and he basically shuts them all down and goes, you know what? I'm not even mad at you. In fact, I will do the one thing Reed Richards has always failed to do for his best friend, and he publicly
Oh,
cures Ben Grimm, even though it's not what Ben Grimm wants. It's
oh,
a great move. I know that's happened in the books before, and they did that in the movies. It was just really well executed. And again, I'm not going to be for everybody, but I do think it's actually pretty cool to see Doctor Doom treated with some gravitas. And so if you're a fan of his who has been tired of him kind of getting weird one-off appearances, I think this actually did a pretty good job. That would be what is in our stack for the week, folks. That's the comics we would recommend, the overall thoughts that we had on them. Let us know what is in your guys' stack for this week. What were the best comics that you read? And as always, whether you agree with us or disagree with us, we love seeing that down below. Thanks as always for watching, folks. God bless you. Hope you have a great day.
thanks, everybody.